So the first question is, what is Leximancer? I guess it's simply called an automatic content analysis machine. And so that then begs the question, what is content analysis? And I think to use a tool like Leximancer, you do have to understand what content analysis is. I think that's a point worth emphasizing, that if you're not familiar with content analysis as a method, it might be worth reading a little bit about it. I know there's techniques, there's quite a few qualitative analysis techniques around, thematic analysis, although exactly what that means, opinions seem to differ. But content analysis is a well-defined technique that was around from the 1940s at least. So the entire purpose of Leximancer is to let the data generate a transparent model. So the default mode of using Leximancer is data-driven, or bottom-up, if you like. Grounded is another word for that. So you put the data in, and it will use the statistics of the word usage in the data to generate and build a model, fairly much from scratch, without much bias built into it. So, and that's one of the good things. That's one of the strengths of Leximancer. And that the model is supposed to be transparent, and it is a model. It's it builds a model for you and then lets you inspect the model. And the model is meant to give you clues, give you hypotheses, if you like a breadcrumb trail for you to interpret. And we call that sense making, the interpretation by the analyst. And that's important. If you've used NVivo before, then I guess think about it as switching the front and the back of the analysis around. So with NVivo, you probably go through the text chunk by chunk and working out what you think should be, classified or coded into that piece of text. With Leximancer, you put the text in and it does that and builds a model. But then after that, you need to do the sense making. So, you might think that Leximancer is a magic wand which does the analysis for you, or you might have the impression that others think that it does that. That is not how we feel about it, and that's not how we train people. You still have to do work. It will create a model for you, and then you still need to sense make that model with reference to the underlying text. But it is a transparent model, and every part of it can be validated by looking at the data underlined. So, and of course, you can do a lot of text this way. You can build a model of very large amounts of text. We've done 3 gigabytes more of text at once. And I wouldn't say, I don't like the word big data. I mean, yes, you can analyze a large chunk of data with Leximancer, but the big data idea that you can get any old bucket of rubbish and put it in and get some sense out of it, that's not true. And you wouldn't do that with Leximancer. You need to get a set of data that is meaningful to consider together, one set of meaning, if you like. So content analysis, it's a research tool for determining the presence of ideas in text. It breaks down qualitative data, which has many, many words in it. Vocabulary of 100,000 words is not unusual for a larger set of text. But it can boil that down into a model using less than 100 ideas in it, and the co-occurrences between those ideas. And then uses those to build a model, a reproducible model. So if you get the same data, you get Leximancer with the same settings, you should get the same model of that information space. But then it's up to you to make sense of it. So I guess the mechanism of content analysis, get your data. There's a sampling question there. So what is an appropriate sampling of the population? If you're looking at just a group of 10 people, working out what they feel, then you could interview each of them. But if you want to do the whole population of Australia, then that's a very different sampling question. And that's up to you, of course. Leximancer won't get to data for you. Deciding what is the basic segment of text analysis, that's an important decision for a content analyst. So 2 sentences is what Leximancer uses by default. It codes every 2 sentences. And if you're doing content analysis yourself by hand, and it's a good idea to think how you might do that, you might choose 1 sentence, or you might choose a whole page of text to code all at once. When you're marking an essay, you mark the whole essay. That's content analysis in a way. You're coding the essay, and that's using the whole document as the unit of analysis. And then you're defining what your concepts are. When I'm marking an essay, maybe the lecturer gives me a rubric, a marking scheme. That tells me what an A, a B, a C might look like. And that defines each of the concepts. When you're coding text for qualitative analysis or content analysis, you often talk about a code book or a dictionary, and that's a collection of ideas, concepts or codes, and it tells you how they're defined. And Leximancer has that. It has a code book, and we'll see an example of that. Sorry? Is there a question?
有，他在啊。
Okay, I'll continue then. So you might wonder how Leximancer develops a dictionary of concepts from the text by itself. It's a technique called latent semantic indexing or latent content analysis. And we'll have a look at the next slide. So this is an example of a latent content, a latent concept taken from the content. This was a body of text, and within that body of text was the idea of a firearm or a rifle, and Leximancer works out a family of words which indicate that idea. So this concept is called rifle, but within the data, this is a family of words. This is a vocabulary. So if you know the vocabulary, this is what we're talking about here. This is the vocabulary that people in this data use to talk about the idea of a rifle. And this is the type of concept that Leximancer extracts from the data. And you can see all sorts of words here which indicate parts of the rifle, brands of a rifle, the name, the alias of a person who bought it even. So it's collected together all that vocabulary and said that these words indicate an idea, and each of them has a certain weight. How predictive is each term of the idea? So that's an example of a latent concept. If you've never seen one before, there are algorithms, there are methods to find the important concepts in a text and collect together the vocabulary for each. Why do you want a vocabulary around a concept? Well, you can probably see that, there might be a piece of text, a paragraph, where someone talks about a firearm using all sorts of different words, but they never use the keyword rifle. They never use that frequent word. They talk about a bolt action, man like a Carcano, Western cartridge lying on the floor, all the other words. So it's this way that people use language to describe an idea. They use all sorts of words, and the software has to collect all those words together. Otherwise, it's not going to measure the presence of a concept properly. And then once it's got this list of words, it uses that to code, to predict that, yes, this piece of text, this paragraph, is in fact talking about a rifle. It's got the set of words, it's got a score. So if it finds a piece of text, it says, oh, well, you're using bolt action, using sling, using rifleman. So if I add up the numbers, I get a score over a certain threshold. And then it decides, well, there's enough evidence to decide that this piece of text is talking about this idea and any other ideas that are also present. That's called coding. So this slide just talks about coding. you could think of it as tagging or classifying each chunk of text with the concepts that are present in it that I mentioned. It's like, and as I said before, it's similar to marking essays, or actually short answer questions. It's very similar to marking short answer questions. And this collection of concepts with their words, you could call it a code book. We call it the Thesaurus within Leximancer, a collection of words which kind of mean an idea together. And then once the coding's been done, you would traditionally, well, there are lots of things you could do with codes. You can count how many times a code appears, its occurrence frequency. You can count how many times codes appear with other codes. Now, if I'm coding for dog and I'm coding for the postman, how often do they occur together? And that tells you something about the relationship that's been stated in the material. And I kind of mentioned before that relationships are the most important thing with using Leximancer. It is designed to find the relationships between concepts within the data. So don't just look at a single concept, look at what it's related to, what it co-occurs with. This is an example of coding, just in case you're still not visualizing it. These are pieces of text, and there are codes assigned to each piece of text. And you can see that this paragraph here has 3 concepts assigned to it. So you don't have to just give one code. You don't have to decide out of 10 or 20 or more codes which is the best fit. You can give any that fit. So if this piece of text talks about feelings and manners and male or masculine things, then you can code it with that, with all 3 of those. And Leximancer does that. So historically, there were 3 types of content analysis. Originally, they did just do frequency, and they did just code with one thing. So if you think that content analysis does just code a piece of text with one idea, that's an old way of doing it. That's the original way of doing content analysis. Just assigning one concept at a time, and all you can get is frequencies. Not very expressive. But then if you let the system code for multiple concepts within the same piece of text, you can look at relationships, and you can start to see the story. Then the 3rd generation of content analysis was called cognitive mapping, or cognitive mapping and cognitive analysis. You might also call that concept mapping or concept network, semantic network. This is a very modern idea. And what it does, well, I'll show you what it does. It creates something that looks a little like this. It finds how the themes relate to each other. So this was an example of a concept map taken from market research, not done by Leximancer. This was done by another research method. And I guess I wanted to show you that this is a research method that has a long history. There's a lot of information about cognitive mapping and how to interpret them. So Leximancer didn't invent the idea. And you can see in this map that the main theme is the Volkswagen Beetle. And then there are other themes, and there are relationships. So these connections, and what do? They show you stories. They show you the VW. People think that they come in neat colors. And the story continues that some of those colors are silver or lime green. Also, it's a good winter car because it's good traction. So that's another story. So there are themes, there are connections which form stories. There's also distance. So you can see that the neat colors area of the map is quite a long way from the good winter car area of the map. So this is very aesthetic. It's about feelings, about colors. And this is a very practical area of the map. So this distance, this part of the map, this quadrant, if you like, is aesthetic, about fun, about nice colors. Whereas down here, you see some very practical ideas. And you will often look for that on these maps. You look for the differences in the quadrants between the areas on the map. So Leximancer is a content analysis engine. There are things you still must do. You have to think about your research question. And without a research question, you won't get too far. It's fun. It's fun to put a whole bunch of text into Lex and see what you get and read around. But if you want to publish, if you want to do more, you really do need a research question. You need to select your data sample and collect that. And then once Lex is finished creating the model, you need to make sense of it. So that's an example of the map, but we'll look at that again. Just finishing up with these slides. If you're interested in knowing more about content analysis, I like Weber, Basic Content Analysis. It's a reasonably short read, but it's got everything, all the basics you need. There are some papers that we recommend for Leximancer. So if you want to publish with it, this is what I'd recommend to cite as a reference for validation of the tool. So we did go through and validating it in the literature. It's a refereed article, and we went through cross-validating the tool as a measure of meaning, as a content analytic tool. So you don't have to, basically. It's a fairly long technical paper, but it's on our website as a PDF if you want a copy of it. And also on the website, on our science page, there are quite a few, we've selected quite a few papers as case studies, how to publish with Leximancer in different disciplines. Beyond that, you can always go to Google Scholar and search for Leximancer, and then your area of research, like Leximancer Education, Leximancer Business, Leximancer Health, and you'll find, well, there are quite a lot of publications out there. There's more than 1,000, at least last time I looked. Yeah, so that's the end of the slides. If you haven't been to the website, it's info.leximancer.com, and you can find form for contacting us there, and the publications that I mentioned before, and a whole lot of other stuff as well. So I guess, are there any questions at that point? I'll just see. Amy, are you aware of any questions? Okay.
Not at this point.
So what did you want to do now, Amy? Just go through some examples? I'd
say the examples that we usually do, in terms of one that's survey analysis and shows the responses. And then probably moving through the software, I'd probably show the data input initially. So we did have a question about PDFs, and PDFs can go in. They're just obviously not as ideal as a CSV. But the question did specifically ask if the tables and graphs in a PDF should be excluded.
Well, they don't have to be excluded, but they won't be.
They won't come up.
Treated. Well, graphs won't do anything with a graph.
But it'll take the headings, won't it?
Well, yes. If you have a caption, it will probably treat that as a text paragraph. From a table, any cell in a table within a document that contains text will be treated as a paragraph. But I guess that you have to understand that Leximancer, when it's faced with a PDF, it has to extract the text out of the PDF file. And it does its best using actually a third-party extractor to turn them into basically paragraphs of textual material. So the structure is kind of gone. It ends up paragraphs of text in pages, and text can't be brought back out of a PDF the way it went in. A PDF file was never intended to do for that. It's not like it doesn't preserve the format of the text as it went in. And in fact, words can get broken up when they come out of PDFs. So I know there are a lot of PDFs out there and people use them, but they weren't designed as a perfect store of text. Not like Word or not like a plain text file. Even HTML, you can always get the text back out clean, but you can't get the text back out clean from a PDF file. And
I think, Andrew, we should show just the document going in, so people get a sense of the type of documents that go in.
Yeah.
And how to load, just those beginning steps, because if we have beginners. There's just another question about automating batching of files. If you've got new files coming in and every month, can you automate and load the analysis of the new files?
If you're a programmer, we don't have a wizard to do that. You have to script it yourself. Leximancer has settings to allow that.
Yep.
But you would need to use it's called a REST interface. If you're a programmer, you would know how to do that, and you would have to do that.
And when we've maybe gone through one example, Andrew, we do have Emily on the line is happy to share her screen and ask a specific question.
Okay.
Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Professor. I thought I could leave a bit later, so if anybody have more general questions before I share my screen.
Yeah, we'll just have Andrew go through one example.
Yeah.
And then we're happy to, it would be great. Thanks, Emily.
Well, thank you. I came last time without my data. This time I prepared.
Ah, well done.
Thank you. Yeah, I chat with Professor later.
Okay. So, well, I'll create a new project from scratch. Well, the various types of data you can load, I mean, there are several. Obviously, think of it in there are two styles of text that you can process. One is unstructured and one is very structured. Unstructured are like collections of PDFs, Word documents, HTML files, plain text. Okay, and you can do all of those and you can mix them up. So if you have a folder with PDFs and Word documents in, for example, it will, you can load all of that at once. So that's an unstructured set of text. And as I said before, if there are tables within those Word documents, they won't be treated as structured tables. They'll be turned into paragraphs of text. But you can analyze structured qualitative data with Leximancer. And to do that, you need your data in a spreadsheet. Now, it could come out of a database, and that's fine. But we talk about a spreadsheet format. And very commonly you see surveys collected in spreadsheet formats. So you might commonly see it in Excel. And, it'll have, let's see if I can find an example for you here. So my set of training data, we've got, where is it? The feedback survey here. So this is an example of a spreadsheet, a survey actually in a spreadsheet format. And you can see that, hopefully you can see. Amy, let me know if they can't see what I'm describing. So there's, columns and rows, and usually you have a respondent per row. So each row corresponds to a person in your survey group, and there's a variable in each column. So there's the date it was collected, the gender, the age, the position. In this case, this was a survey of a university. So there were faculty, staff, and students. Now, this is nice when you can get a rating of satisfaction. They're very useful. Now, I know it looks quantitative, and you might be wondering, well, why is there quantitative data here? There's a discipline or a method called mixed methods, where you have quant data and qual data together. They are much more powerful together. Doing a mixed methods method for your research, I would recommend it. So if you ask a question like, how satisfied are you with, in this case, this was the IT service at a university, ask a Likert scale. Likert scale is like, in this case, 1 to 7. How satisfied are you with it? 1 to 7. So that gives you kind of their basic satisfaction, their emotion. Am I happy or not? Then you ask them, why did you give that score? Then you open it up, and they can give an open-ended And you could go long on that. You could ask them for like half a page on that if you wanted to. And together, that's very powerful. You can then, with using Leximancer, you can characterize each of the groups. So those people who give a high score, you don't have to guess their sentiment, you know it. It's like the 6s and 7s scores for their satisfaction. And then from using Leximancer, you can work out, why did they give that score? What was front of mind for them? What were they happy about? And at the other end, the 1s, 2s, and 3s, what were they unhappy about? So you can get a lot of power using that without having to, if you just ask a qualitative question, it's difficult to get a reliable sentiment out of text, because people can be very, and some people are trained not to use excitable language like swear words. Academics, we're always trained when we write, you don't use emotional language. You be objective. Doesn't mean we're not critical. We are obviously very critical at times, but if we're not using emotional language, if you get academics reviewing things and then you get people on Twitter and social media reviewing something, you're going to get very different emotional or affective language. And it's hard to calibrate for that. Whereas if you have a satisfaction score, or I guess a crude way of doing it is a like or a dislike, you've got that. You've asked the question and you've got a quantitative measure of that. So I would recommend doing that. And once you've got that, so this data in the spreadsheet format, get into Excel or some other spreadsheet program, then export it as what's called CSV, comma separated values. It's a text-based structured format, because that's what Leximancer needs. So if you've got that sort of data, export as CSV. It's easy to do in Excel. You just do a save as, find the CSV, and just do it. It works really well. And then you can load that straight into Leximancer to do a structured form of text analysis. So the first example I'll do is that. I'll just close that spreadsheet, and then we'll do a new project from scratch. So I'm in Leximancer here, just so, if you're starting off, this is where you might start. Over on the left-hand side, you won't see much. Obviously I've got a lot of projects, so I use it all the time. All you'll see is well, what it'll look like is that. And you would say, okay, go to Leximancer projects, right click on it. Maybe you want to create a folder. I would have got some folders here, so I'm going to use that. And in my training folder, again, I right click on that and I go create project, and let's call it a spreadsheet. Okay, so it appeared inside my training folder. I've got a project called spreadsheet, and as soon as you create a new project, its control panel automatically gets opened, and you can see it over here on the right. If you're coming back to a project and you want to get to that control panel, just double click on it over here and you'll get it open again. Okay, now this looks like a pipeline here. Each of these blue boxes is a process, and they're connected together into a pipeline. So the data comes in at this end, the left-hand end, and out the right-hand end pops your analysis. Along the way, there are settings you can change. And so you can see these settings. We're going to select the data first. So when I press, what did I press? I pressed select documents. Now, I've got my data selection here. I should point out, it's worth trying to remember that Leximancer separates your data from your projects. They're not in the same place. This this left-hand filing cabinet, if you like, over here, this is your projects organized into folders. This is not your data. And this is not where you go to find your data either. This is where you go to find your projects. So when I click on select documents, I get another filing cabinet here, which is where you go to find your data. And if you're using desktop Leximancer, this actually shows you what's on your hard disk on your own computer. So this is showing you what's under my home folder on my computer. And I could go exploring the rest of my hard disk here if I wanted to. I'm on a Mac here, so it's not going to look quite the same as a Windows machine, but I can explore, you know, my whole hard disk here. So what I want to do is I want to go and find my text data. So looking down here, there's my text data folder in my home area. You know, I can see a bunch of, well, a whole lot of different data sets I've collected over the years. So I'm going to go and find some tabular data, because we're doing a spreadsheet here, which is a table. And a spreadsheet is just an example of a table. So here are my CSV files. So this was my spreadsheet that I exported as CSV. It's my IT survey. And, well, doesn't matter. I'll probably take this one. So what I'm doing now is I am telling this project which data I want it to process. So I'm dragging this CSV file over here into this right-hand box. Now, with a survey, I would recommend only doing one survey at a time, one CSV file at a time. But if you had collections of documents, you could drag a whole folder of text across. And if we get time, we'll have a look at that. But you know, to do that, you just drag. If you want to do a whole bunch of folds of text, which I've got here for a different project, different type of analysis, I would most of the time I would drag the whole folder across, and then I would analyze all data underneath. Anyway, at the moment, I'm just looking at this this survey, this spreadsheet file. I've dragged it across. I hit OK. So now this node turns green, and that means it's done. It's been satisfied. So now the basic things you have to do: select your data, and then you can go all the way to the final processing stage here called Generate Concept Map, and you can just click that. You don't have to do anything else for your basic standard sort of default analysis. Now, obviously, it's not going to give you the things you might want to do, many things you might want to do, which you won't get on the default map. But if you just have some text and you want to pop it in here, press Generate Concept Map, and out the end, you'll get you know, a first look at your data and what's in it. So my first look at this data gives me a concept map. You can, if you need more screen space, you can close your project area here using this arrow at the top. So I'm going to do that. And then we can see the concept map and some other tabs on the right-hand side. Quite a few tabs, actually, which do various things. So, well, I talked initially about the code book. So the first thing we're going to look at here is the code book, a content analytic thing that is used to code the data. So this is how Leximancer has discovered the concepts within this text by itself. So I can see there are concepts here. Each name here there's a concept of classes, classrooms, computers, equipment, an idea like difficult. And when I click on each of these, on the right-hand side appears the words that are associated, the vocabulary that's associated with, for example, difficult or equipment, information. And so the list of words with their weights that define and describe information in this data, you can see over here on the right. Now this is not a big data set, so you'll not get a rich vocabulary here. we'll see shortly a bigger data set. So if you think about text and language, if you have a lot of text, particularly from a lot of different people, a lot of communicators, then you're going to get a bigger vocabulary, a richer, deeper vocab around each concept, because people use different words, they're trained differently, they think about things different ways. Only a small amount of text, you get a much smaller thesaurus and a much smaller vocabulary. So that's the concepts and how they're defined. You don't necessarily have to look in here. It's really, if you're curious, you want to do some quality control on your concepts. Each of these is what's called a classifier, and it's used to code the text. So this is how the system has worked out that there are 26 text segments that use the idea that, of usage. Now, you may be tempted to say, oh, that's useless. Why would I want the concept of use? But I would say that for this data, when you're looking at IT, and the usability is a core theme in IT. So you would definitely want the concept of use to be very important in this. Usability is a central theme. And so don't be in a hurry to write off a concept like use, because it's a very important part of the story. For example, if I click on computer and I look at use, they co-occur together 5 times, and looks like it's a reasonably important concept for building the story around the computer. So this is about using computers out of hours or off campus versus on campus. So yes, there are usability things that they're talking about. So yeah, so what did I do there? Well, to start with, I was in the ranked concept list, which shows me the frequency of concept usage. Frequency is only takes you so far. Use, computer, it just tells you the frequency. But if I click on a concept like problem, then it shows me what it's related to. When they're talking about problem, what else are they talking about in the same segment? Well, they're talking about these other concepts: problem, campus, assistance, classes, slow. So that starts to tell you a little bit more of the story. And that's the second type of content analysis, called relational. Those relationships between those concepts, thinking of them as glue or a network. And if I talk about a network, networks contain ideas or things and relationships between things. Well, that's what we've got here. This is a concept network that I'm exploring. And because we've got a concept network, we can then visualize those links over here on the right and see those relationships between those concepts have allowed the system to create a concept map. And this is that cognitive sort of mapping, the third type of content analysis. And there are various ways we can look at that. One way to get started might be to increase the visible concept slider to 100% and turn the theme size all the way down to 0. So you can see the basics, the underpinnings of the map. I can see concepts, and I can see there are big gray dots. They're the most central, the most connected concepts. Use, computer. And then I can see the smaller dots. These are the least connected. So we're talking about it. Not only have we got a concept map based on the concept network, but we have a hierarchy. So you can see that actually by revealing the concept slowly using the slider. And you can see what are the tops of the mountains, what are the most connected, the central concepts. So over here, central concept is equipment, and I can see around it, I talk about needs and classrooms and time and slow and difficult, availability. So there's little narratives appearing here, little clues, which show you what the important stories in your data may be. You know, equipment needs in classrooms in a timely manner for teaching. So if I follow that network, that gives me a clue that maybe that's an important story. You know, I can look at staff and service and helpful people over here. I can look at computers. When are they open? The lab, getting into them from home, problems with computers. So these are the hypotheses that you read off this sort of model. And as I say, we didn't invent this sort of analysis. If you want to read more about this, look up multidimensional scaling. So multidimensional scaling was one of the first techniques which used this sort of layout of a network to analyze high dimensional data, complex data. And this is actually one of the few ways to objectively model high dimensional and qualitative data, which is why we use it. So you don't have to use the themes, but what they are is this is hierarchical clustering. So you can choose to cut this hierarchy at different places. So if I cut it at a low level, I get a, you know, deep down, I get lots of clusters, not very useful at this level, very concrete down at the low level concepts. But I can slide it all the way up here and get some very high level clusters. So there's usability, there's staff, and teaching. So you might look at it at that very high level. So this is a way of hierarchically clustering your data. As I say, if you don't want to use hierarchical clustering to make sense of it, you don't have to. You can explore this, drill down to the text, see. I mean, I was suggesting before that equipment and needs was an important idea. I can click on equipment and see what is that concept related to. So there's needs here, and I can click on the magnifying glass there to show the text. So these are the comments that talk about equipment needs, and you can check it out. You can validate it. As I said, this is only a very small survey, so the numbers here are very low, but that's because this is the only survey we could find which we could share publicly. You know, surveys are always confidential usually, so just, you know, bear with us. This is publicly available data, but it does show the idea. So looking at relationships between concepts is important, but you can also make it simple on yourself by looking at whole themes. So, you know, if I use the hierarchical clustering and say, okay, I've got at some level, this is another easy way in where you can say, okay, there's a theme around use, there's a theme around equipment, a theme around staff. And this is about, well, you might wonder what this is about. So let's, you know, we could bring in some concepts, see what this is about. Well, this is about a help desk, assistance desk. Well, so it's a help desk, it's an assistance desk. And to understand that, and this is the way when I'm consulting, this is how I make it easy on myself. I do a map like this to work out the thematic space. What are the important ideas in this data? And then I work out the level that I think works. And I think 45% works quite well here as a hierarchical clustering of these concepts. Then I go and use the analyst synopsis, the first tab, increase the detail level to high. So now what I'm going to do is I'm kind of going to audit this. I'm going to go through each of these clusters and I'm going to do a sense making. I'm going to make sense of it, try and capture it in my own words. What do all the texts that underlie this, what do they mean? So when we talk about sense making, we're saying, these are the clusters of concepts. Now, what do the underlying texts mean? So look at the red theme. So that's the hot theme, that's the most connected, has the most connections to the other concepts within it. And the cool ones are the coolest, they're the least important. So look at, what's this theme? This theme, the red one, is use. So let's have a look at use. These are the concepts inside it, and you can see these match. Classes, problem, home, students. They're all in here. Use, computer, students, problem, home. Tells a little story by itself, or at least I think it does. And then you've got the top 5 pieces of text which support this theme, which you can inspect. If you then click on this list of concepts, you see it looks a little like a hyperlink if you hover over it. And if you click on it, that shows you all 64 text segments that support this theme. So now you can go and read it, or read some of them anyway, and get an idea, what are the repeated stories here? Keep reading until you stop being surprised is the way I do it. And I'll be all the time trying to think, what's this really trying to say? What's a better name for this theme? And if I wanted to write a paragraph on my own words as to what the people were saying about usability, what would it be? And also on the way through, I might log some of these pieces of text using the add to log button to put as verbatims, as quotes in my report, as examples of statements which support each of my ideas, or each of the ideas that were visible. So that's the sense-making approach. And then you can go back to the annual synopsis and go through and do the next theme, which might be equipment. And work your way through each of these, collecting quotes, collecting an understanding of what each of these ideas are. And when you've done, you've got several important things. In a fairly objective way, you've gone through and assessed and sense-made all the major themes in the data. You found some of the important quotes that support it, and your understanding has increased. One major use for Leximancer is learning. If you don't know what's in the data, then Leximancer can give you a very quick way of assessing what's in the data and what does it mean. Instead of reading hundreds of documents, you can spending 20 minutes to half an hour going around a concept map of 100 documents and reviewing the evidence. It's surprising how quickly you can get up on that data and get a good understanding of it, rather than spending days reading it all.
Andrew, should we jump in and have a look at
Yes.
Emily offered her data?
All right then. So that's an analysis, quickly gone through sense making. All right, so now I'll stop sharing if Emily wants to share her data. So I've stopped sharing. Is Emily able to share, Amy?
Yes.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm able to do that. Can you see this?
I can.
Yeah. Maybe I just I wrote down 3 specific questions. Then maybe we can go through a bit more. So to understand what the data is.
Yeah.
Normally, as Professor demonstrated, I just without doing any pre-processing, I just go through it to see how the keyword will look like. So this is the first time that I ran. I found, okay, there are some broken words that I don't want. For example, this 4B or Bruce or Gary. So in the second time, I did go through the concept Cs and removed the concept that I don't want.
Yep.
Yeah. However, when I ran it, I found Gary is still here, and this hyperlink is also here. And I went back to check my concept seeds, and I found they were not here.
Yes.
So what was the reason that?
I can tell you what that is.
Yeah.
So so practically, the way we train people to remove concepts from the map is not in the concept seed editor. If you can close that,
yeah,
hit cancel. So yeah, sorry. If you hit cancel, you don't have to rerun, but now you'll have to rerun the generate thesaurus.
Oh, but I have it here, right?
All right then.
Yeah.
Well, yes, but I need to go back to the processing. So you will have to run generate thesaurus.
Maybe, are you able to control this?
Yeah, can you give controls over?
I will give Professor control. Can you do that? I give Professor Andrew. Yep.
Yes, okay. I now have control. All right, so I'm just going to run generate thesaurus.
Yeah.
So while that's running, you might wonder what's happening here. So generate thesaurus is a machine learning algorithm. And like machine learning algorithms tend to be, it's a type of neural network, deep learning. And what it does, it takes your seed words, each word from your seed list, and tries to find words that are associated with each of them. And that's what you saw before in the thesaurus. But what it does for an automatic concept, so these seeds were found automatically, and if it finds, like learning the related words for any one of these, like government, it tries to find the related vocabulary around associated with these terms. If it finds a more frequent term pops up, it renames the concept. So this is the important thing. It can take one of these automatic concept seeds, and once it's found the related terms, if a more frequent word becomes more relevant to the idea, it will rename the concept. That's why you might have some of these seed words have been renamed to like the URL, so they'll pop up even though they're not in your seed list. Some other seeds have been renamed into these concepts. So the best place to remove concepts is here. And where am I? I'm in concept coding settings in the first tab. So what you don't want all these concepts. These are all that are available in the code book in the thesaurus. There's the word-like concepts over here. There's the name-like ones over here. Now we don't want all of these on the map. We've got a code book, but we don't want the system to use all the concepts to code the data with. And that's a common thing. A content analyst will tell their coders, well, I don't want you to use these to code today because it's not important to my research question. You can do that with Leximancer. So what you do is you remove these are, we call them wildcards. If you don't know what that means, all discovered names will get all the name-like concepts, all the named entities from the data and put them on the map. Now, I don't want those. So what I do is I'll select this and use this arrow to remove it. So now it won't code for any of these available name-like entities. And if you look, they've all turned blue. And that's because they're not in use. So if there's some of these I want, I could put them back. Maybe I want Australia on the map. So I might put that back. Maybe, I'm not sure what these mean, but you get the idea. I could put selected ones back that way. Now, if there's some of these word-like concepts I don't want, again, all concepts goes and grabs them all and activates them. So if I don't want them, I need to remove that from the map, from the mapping concepts list, and now go and select the ones I do want. I could use the tick box at the top to click all of them and move them all across, and then go and, if I don't want 10 meters, I can get rid of that one. So now I can select the particular ones that I do want and leave out the ones I don't. And because this happens, because I'm doing this after the machine learning, this is the final word, right? So this is how you control coding. And so when I hit OK, that will save those changes. So this is where you control the coding after the machine learning. All right.
Question. So this step is different with the kill concept.
Oh, kill concepts. Yeah. No, all right. Well, since you asked, I will talk about that. And it's really important not to use kill concepts unless you understand what they do. So what we were doing here was we were in the first tab called mapping concepts. Think about it this way. I have a dictionary. I have a set of concepts here which are available to code the data. You might think about it. This is a palette an artist's palette of pigments that are available for painting a picture, but they don't want to use them all. So this is where you can choose what to paint the picture with. Leave some out, put some in. Kill concepts, on the other hand, kill and required are very different. These are filters. So kill concepts are for filtering out whole text segments. So it's a subtle point, but it is meaningful. Imagine I have a text segment. Let's say I have a paragraph of text that talks about water bombers, right? And for some reason, I don't want it coded with that. They talk about, using twin engine planes bought from America to water bomb a national park. For some reason, I don't want it coded with bombers. So I take that out. But I do want it coded with national park and bushfire and whatever else that happened in that text segment. So taking this concept of bombers out of this list, it will still code that text segment with anything else that's in this. So just think about this is, do I want to code a piece of text with an idea, or don't I want to code it with that idea? Kill is different. Imagine you have some text in there you just don't want. I have some text that talks about, I don't know, Whitlam, whatever that means. So every time someone mentions the idea of Whitlam in their text, maybe it's some political stuff you don't want. Or maybe like in papers, in collections of journal articles, it's often bibliographies at the end of your PDFs. If you put Whitlam in here as a kill concept, it will not code, any text that has this concept in it will not be coded with anything at all. So it would be as if that paragraph of text was not present at all. It will suppress it.
So I can understand if you kill this concept, it's basically remove the whole sentence or remove.
Yes, correct. Which is why it has a scary name like kill concept, and you need to be cautious. Because for example, in this data, if I killed the concept of bushfire, can you imagine what that would do?
I tried once, it's 0. There's no concepts at all.
Yeah, because most, if not all, the data is about the idea of bushfire. So you just suppressed coding of the whole text body, all your text. So don't do that. They are useful. They can be really useful if you know what you're doing. If you need to filter out like all the bibliographies or, the survey we did just before, if you want to filter out all the demographic, if you don't want to analyze all the student submissions to that survey, and you get the tag called student and put it in here as a kill concept, then you can filter out that whole demographic at once. Easily. So they are powerful and really nice when you need them.
Yeah, I think so.
Don't use them wrongly.
I agree. So if I don't want, for example, any message from the media, like 7 News Melbourne, then I can kill the concept. So any.
Yes, that's right.
That's a good idea.
So I'm going to take that out because leaving kill concept in, okay, required concept is the flip side of that. If I only wanted to analyze, if I just wanted to analyze a subset of my data, if I want to do a thematic analysis around, what's an example? Housing, how it affects housing, for example. If I put that in as a required concept, then only the text segments that deal with the concept of housing will be analyzed. They'll still be coded with anything else that they mention, and so that'll give you a nice relational map, a real focus, and it's a real lens into just looking at the concepts that are mentioned in the context of housing. So that's another really nice thing you can do, and that's what required concepts will give to you, so long as you understand what it does. Okay?
This is a very good idea.
But yes, anyway, I better take that out now so you're not, because, for research purposes, obviously you don't want to accidentally cut out half the data in your corpus and not know about it. So, be careful about these required and kill concepts. But, using a required concept to focus in on all the relationships around a particular, either an idea or a person or an organization can be really powerful.
Okay. Just that concept seeds. I remember once I actually removed identify name like a seed. So what is the purpose that you must have this identify name likely seed concept?
So names are different, and they actually have different statistics from words. So what we're talking about here is Leximancer, when it pulls in the text, it identifies proper nouns. In other words, things that start with uppercase or all uppercase, or even if it has uppercase as a second or a letter within it. We call that camel case, like an iPhone starts with lowercase I and then there's an uppercase P. So those things are treated a bit separately. They're names of people, places, products, organizations, as opposed to ideas. And why do you want to think about names? Well, you might not. Most of the time academics are interested in ideas. But if you're in the business world, then looking at like business intelligence, networks of companies and officers like CEOs, they can be important. And there was a research technique called social network analysis, which looked at the relationships between, people and companies, and looked at different types of relationships. Are they economic relationships? Are they friendship or family relationships between people? So there is a way to make Leximancer only find the names within the data if you want to do sort of social network analysis.
Okay, but the function, the final result does not distinguish between available names or concepts, right? They will just blend in with each other.
Well, they are all nodes in the concept network, but they are actually classified differently. You don't have to know about it, but the classifier that does the coding, it actually treats name-like entities different from concepts.
Right. Okay, but like this debusting, they don't have...
Yeah, so that started with a capital D probably more than once, and that can happen. So if it started at the beginning of a sentence, it's possible that there was a headline, maybe. I don't know. I don't know this data. But say, for example, if there was a headline that appeared multiple times and it started with the word devastating, then it would start with a capital D. So that's that's the case where things you can't do a perfect job with text, because beginning of a sentence has an uppercase, and in this case, that's a bit misleading. But you can change it into a lowercase. You can do that, make it be treated as a lowercase. You can merge it with devastating with a lower D, or you could just remove it. Because if it's just from a few headlines or titles, then it may not matter that much. But yeah, that's a case where things are not perfect, but qualitative text data is like that. Things are never as clean as you might think.
Yeah, I think so. It's about the person to make the data, to make the result make sense.
Well, yeah, and so if we let's see, if I save that, if we ran that, you can always use Leximancer to find what it means anyway. I mean, you don't have to guess. You don't have to have guesswork involved here. If we go to the map now, I can go to my rank concept list over here in the tab. Oh, okay. I took it out. I took it out anyway. So I didn't have it in my mapping concepts list. But what I was going to show you, if you're wondering what this means, I don't know quite what this means at the moment. It looks like it's something about New South Wales, I would guess. But what you can do is just go to the rank concept list and find this item, click on this number, 864. That's telling you there are 864 places where it's in use. But if I click on that, that lets me see all the places where this is being coded into the text.
Well, the data set is pretty messy. I haven't really cleaned it up.
Yeah, it is. And I'm just looking at something else here. I'm going to have a look at your thesaurus. Yeah, this is what I thought.
Yeah.
See this 10?
Yep.
That means that your machine learning has overgeneralized a little bit. It's in the manual, but you would aim for a bit less than 10. So what I would suggest in this particular data is I would close the maps here. Oh, this is a Fraser Island file. Okay. Go to Thesaurus, the machine learning settings here, and this concept generality.
Yeah.
Actually, the pop-up help tells you what's going on here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to wind this back to probably around 9. And this controls the machine learning, the deep learning algorithm, so that it doesn't overgeneralize a little bit. So now this should finish learning in less than 10 iterations if I were to run this now.
It was too much.
10 is too much in my opinion. What we do cap it, so it won't do more than, okay, you might want to know what's going on here. If the machine learning starts with a word like bushfire, it then goes through the text to find all the words that appear with bushfire and not much elsewhere. It then goes and adds them to the idea of bushfire. So you might find conflagration or burning or something like that, another word which is tightly bound to it. And then it builds a new definition with more words. And then it goes back to the text and looks for places in the text which have conflagration, bushfire, or burning, any of those words, and tries to find new words that appear with that whole set. So it's trying to grow the vocabulary and find new places in the text which talk about the idea. But you can take that too far. The machine learning can overgeneralize. We do stop it at 10, but so we've got it down to 9 now, and that's probably okay.
Yeah, look much more cleaner. The words, that's what makes sense now. If actually can do.
So it's going to tidy up some things about your thesaurus. So if we look at bushfire concept, yeah, so looking at the concept of bushfire now, I'm happier with this because the top few terms are fairly tight. We've got bushfires, victims, we've got ravaged, bushfire with a capital B, bushfire with a lower B. So that looks fairly tight. And burning has become its own concept. So yeah, I would recommend keeping this down below 10. So I think this is probably a little tighter than it was before. All right.
So the last question.
Yep.
So the data set, I think for the text preprocessing setting, because my data is actually from a set of Twitter. So it's a bit messy with lots of tweets. I was trying to think about the general setting. For example, this one was saying, if a paragraph is shorter than 3 sentences, should you consider ignoring paragraph? And I chose to ignore because every tweet is just a 1 sentence, right? So in what situation should I click or remove this?
Yeah, look, that's a really good question. And it is an important decision as a content analyst. What is your text segment? You can see at the top here that this is 2 sentences. So this is the number of sentences comprising each text segment. By default will be 2. But as you say, break a paragraph overrules that. So what this does is if it finds 1 sentence and then a paragraph break, that text segment will end. So yes, you'll probably have 1 text segment per tweet. And that's going to be shorter than, shorter than 3 sentences, certainly. But that's often okay with tweets. Mm-hmm. What's going on here is that when you're breaking text into segments to code it for relational content analysis, the code window, that text segment is really quite important, because what you're telling the software is when you give it a segment of text, you're saying that everything within the segment was meant to be there. The author or the speaker purposefully put these concepts together into a text segment to state a relationship between them. So that's the phrase there. They are deliberately stating a relationship between all the words in the text segment. So if you make your text segment long, make it contain 2 tweets, if you let it cross between the paragraph breaks and contain 2 tweets at once, then you're telling the software, well, these tweets were related. The words in one are deliberately and purposefully correlating with the words in the other. And that might not be true for social media posts. Often a social media post is atomic. It's the post is self-contained. Where you might want to let it cross paragraph boundaries is for an interview. If I have an interview where there's a fairly quick back and forth between the interviewer and the interviewee, I ask a question, you respond, I respond to your response, we're creating a discourse, then we do often let it cross the paragraph boundary between the utterances. So that discourse that's building up between the 2 conversants, the 2 people in the interview, we let the question and the answer correlate together, appear in the same text segment, so that you don't just get half the story. If that makes sense, that if I ask you a question and I ask, what do you feel about this? And you immediately respond, well, it's really good. The answer doesn't contain the question. So in that case, it's a good idea to let the text segment cross that boundary to include both the question and the answer. So it has all the meaning. What do I think about global warming? And then there's a new paragraph. Well, I think that it's a critical problem of our time. That answer by itself doesn't contain the question. So letting it cross that paragraph break between them can help the story form.
Okay.
So sorry if I went on a bit there and was straying into proper training, but it's a good question.
Because social media data, it doesn't really have the way you said it, it's a full story. It's just let's just say it's a document with lots of lines. So I wasn't sure, is it better that they treat them as a whole document, or it's better that Leximancer treat them sentence by sentence? Because if I click a break at the paragraph, that means they are going to treat sentence like per tweet, right?
So it's probably, at this point, I would have a look at your data.
Yeah.
So to do that, I often, just to see the format, I go and look at the most frequent concept, look at its count, and then I'll pop up, use one of these links above the text segments to look at the full text view and get an idea of what it looks like. So each one of these is essentially a tweet, is it?
Yes.
Right. It looks like they have paragraph breaks between them.
I think some are retweets. This is actually the biggest confusion I have, because every time I try to process social media data, they don't break properly, because some end with a hyperlink, some end with some weird letters. I wasn't sure, do they treat them as a per tweet, or they are just treating this whole document as one, how do you say, as one story?
So I would probably at this point have to take this offline, because yes, there's something wrong with the character encoding. See these characters here?
Yeah, I don't know why it doesn't make sense.
Yeah, this is an incorrect character encoding problem. Again, I'm getting into real training content here. You need to understand that computer text, there isn't just one way of encoding it. In the internet, or computers generally have had a whole history of different coding schemes. And it started with ASCII and moved on to 8-bit encodings like ISO encoding. And then the latest one is Unicode, which tries to cope with all languages in the world, because ASCII only dealt with English.
I don't think this is Leximancer's problem. It's my problem.
No, but there is a way to deal with it in Leximancer if you know what the correct encoding is. So what you can do is when you select your data here,
Yep.
and select documents, there is a char set.
Yeah.
When you drag this across, here you can tell Leximancer what the char set, it's a character set or the character encoding. And you'll see the unfortunate history of the internet has led to all these different ways that computers have encoded text. And let's have another look at that. One of the common ones was ISO Latent. It's been phased out now. The original one, the internet started off using ASCII, and so did, computers certainly did. UTF-8 is Unicode. That's what we're moving. That's what's the standard now. Microsoft brought in Windows 12.5.2 because they didn't like using internet standards. So there are lots of different encodings, and you kind of have to work out what encoding your text data is. Now, you don't, most of the time you'll be okay, but in your case where you've got weird characters appearing like that, then you start to have an encoding problem. And in which case you might have to work out what encoding your text is. We can do it. So if you sent us a text, we would open it up in a programmer's editor. Editors that programmers use, some of them will tell you what character encoding the data is in. And then
think it's the way to download it. Sometimes I clean up a little bit in Notepad Plus using this, what do you call Rex or something, those characters to remove this weird character and hyperlink. So normally I do a little bit text pre-processing to then import into Leximancer. Yep. This time I didn't. It's my fault.
But if you get the character encoding completely wrong, Leximancer defaults to UTF-8. If the data is not UTF-8, if it's a European 8 encoding, you'll get weird characters.
I agree.
And contrary wise, if the thing is Unicode and you tell it it's a 7 or 8-bit ASCII, you will get very weird behavior. In fact, you'll probably get an error. So yeah, anyway, that's encoding. And
thanks everyone for joining. Appreciate it. We'll send the link around.
Okay. Thanks everyone.
Thanks for your time, Andrew.
Bye.